I'm coming from the big LNG world. Those who know me will know that I'm not a friend of friendly words. Very simply because when I hit the LNG world, I have hit a business that was, at the time when I hit it, already deeply dysfunctional. Very simply because the business models that are still valid today in the big-scale LNG world are a thing of the archaic past. They have been developed 40, 50 years ago, and the essence of them are still shining through in the contracts. And I'm probably one of the most ferocious debaters about that has to change. It has changed in a certain way, but that still has some change. Now, again, I call myself in certain forums the pit bull of LNG. That's not certainly a pit bull, but I like the picture. So I just wanted to prepare you. If there is thorny questions or issues out there, if you disagree with me, please throw it on me. There's not one opinion in this room. This is an area where actually the world is being invented right now. If I know something about invention, I was at the core of developing the gate terminal for the company I was working for, Econ Gas. We were negotiating months long, year long actually, sometimes until 2 o'clock in the morning. And that for whole weeks. We had a couple of people who had nervous breakdowns, needed doctor's intentions and everything. The reason was very simple. Because a couple of players who had never done LNG before in their entire existence, and those were players that were sometimes in existence for more than half a century, were sitting together at a table, trying to pull off one of the most sophisticated projects that actually you can see still today in the LNG world. The first real multi-user regasification terminal that exists on the face of Earth, that was built as such with a third-party developer that just doesn't hold any kind of capacity rights in it. That has never existed in the world before. So the situation that we faced was that we had a set of contracts from other regasification ventures that was completely dysfunctional. We had to rewrite the rule book, which was really difficult. The difficulty was not understanding the matter, because we had the matter pretty quick. The difficulty was making our managements understand, because they were still living in the old world. Some of them are still actually today. And spending the time it took us to convince our management of certain basic truths that today some people take for granted was so enormous. And we had tight deadlines because we wanted to sign up by December 2007 at the very latest. So we knew we are running against the wall over here, that we decided very early in the process, we cannot fix the contract, but we can prep the project contractually in a way that gives us some room for maneuver in a world that is more LNG as a fuel, LNG for bunkering, LNG as a replacement for diesel and heavy fuels in the world. Again, we weren't able to fix problems, but we were able to provide a couple of contractual anchor points. I did some programming in my life, and those who know code, for example WordPress, know that you have certain interfaces which are created by the machines in order for developers to hook in. Well, we have provided those hooks in the system. Well, let me go a little bit further. I have tried to create a story. No facts. You got so many facts today. It was deeply interesting. But just a story. We want LNG for our vehicles. But one thing that people really have to understand, that the current LNG industry as it exists is not built for this. And it doesn't understand it. And the most important thing is it doesn't want to understand it. There's zero will in the LNG industry to understand what's happening in the LNG for fuel sector. They just think that they are just doing a little bit more complex logistics, and that's it. And that's certainly not going to be true. We have built all those things, but what we haven't done is, we have never spent one single second of trying to make this whole thing link up. How can we connect what exists today in the big baseload business with what's going to come into place over the next decade in the LNG for fuels business? Because, no mistake here, since I'm in LNG, I have always thought it's a very, very bad idea of going through all the hassle and the expense of taking natural gas, cooling it down to minus 162 degrees for making it a liquid, and have nothing else to do than throwing it into the terminal, running it over a couple of aluminum plates and turning it back into gas. All the advantage that we have in LNG is gone with regasification, because there's no more fantasy with that. Why did that happen? Very simply. As long as you have a monopolistic gas business, nobody cares about advantages, about optimization, about further possibilities, further things that you could do. Everybody just cares about this 20-year business model and peace of mind. But in today's world, it doesn't exist anymore. We can, of course, go and build new liquefaction, and that will happen a lot of times for technical reasons, for gas quality reasons, for logistical reasons, just because the LNG is not available. But we could also go and try to use what we have, which is not going to be easy. Why? Small LNG production has a lot of merits, and you will not find me now an opponent of small LNG productions. I'm a big fan of what's happening in the nitrogen expansion business. I'm a big fan of what's happening in the small LNG, in the mid-scale LNG segment, everywhere in the world. I really love those developments, and they're going to push the industry to a point where actually we have never seen them before. But, and this is one of the problems, is that we have a situation where we have to create some infrastructure. And nobody is going to go out there and spend $100 million or $200 or $300 billion on some infrastructure without knowing that we have business. Except, of course, if you're the German government and you want to put another useless wind park into the North Sea. So, somehow we have to find a way of how to make this happen in an economical way. People have to understand the economics, not the numbers. The numbers will be run by accountants, and I'm not an accountant. I'm actually on the other side. I'm a trained lawyer, so I'm at war with numbers for pretty much all my life. Fortunately, there's excellent. But what exists today is built for an enormous amount of inflexibility. Remember Qatar? I heard a lot of economies of scale today. Now, this economies of scale talk I'm hearing since I have joined the natural gas industry, which now is already quite a couple of years back. Everybody throws it on me. We just got to build bigger. It's the Exxon style. Yeah? And then you're going to save money. Is that true? No, it isn't. You don't save money by building bigger. You save money by mass-producing certain standardized equipment. That's how you save. If you look at, for example, the Apollo project, the Saturn V rocket was a handmade piece of equipment. That's why it was so expensive. The space shuttle was a handmade piece of equipment. That's why it was so expensive. Look at what happens today with SpaceX and all those other private ventures. They're trying to industrialize it, standardize the whole thing, trying to throw off big numbers of reliable standardized equipment off a conveyor belt. And this is actually where it's going to make a difference. And this is where natural gas engines, LNG tanks, everything you need technology-wise in order to make this whole thing happen is going to come down in price. And I have absolutely zero doubts that there will be a day when all by itself the natural gas engine will match the diesel engine in price. As I'm standing over here, I'm sure this is going to happen. I don't know when, but certainly over the next 7 to 10 years. And I'm waiting for that. Technology has a way of taking care of that. So, in the new LNG world, you need flexibility. Our regasification terminals, and Gate is just one example, are not being built for that. Because if you talk to a terminal operator, he has $1 billion of finance in place. And the last thing he wants is the least amount of uncertainty entering the picture. Because at the time when his lenders came out with $1 billion, they made a risk assessment on this whole thing. And the result of this risk assessment determined the conditions of his financing. Now, they don't, of course, want to talk about anything that changes that. Even if there's upside potential, they don't want to talk about it. Very simply because any change in what's being put into place, the whole procedure of getting to a project like a regasification terminal was so enormously painful, you don't want to open the package anymore. It's like in IT. If it works, don't touch it. No matter how it works. You don't want to understand what's happening behind. Just don't touch it. It works somehow. Now the real question is, we're here with the terminal. How to get the LNG from here to here, because that's where we need it. And it just so happens that there is a good connector, because LNG cannot be piped very, very far. There's cryogenic piping, but anybody who has done this knows that first, it's forbiddingly expensive. Second, it's a technological challenge. Yeah? You can transport it by truck, of course. Proven solution, works wonderfully, absolutely no problem. You can transport it by rail. The Japanese are doing that in a couple of other countries. Again, proven solution. Absolutely no problem with that. You won't find me to say any bad word about that. But in bulk transport, it's always good to use what you have, waterways. And this is something that very, very few people are looking at. And it just so happens that Gate is at the beginning of such a waterway, which goes right down to the Black Sea. We call this the Rhine, and then a channel here, Danube River Basin. Now I do know for a fact from the Danube River shipping companies that they are aiming for a solution like this. Why? Because their business model is under assault. Danube River shipping has been contracting for the last 50 years. It has been going back. It was battered by rail transport, by road transport. Nobody's doing anything for that. Now, if this here could become the LNG artery of Europe, and don't tell me it's not possible, because it is actually surprisingly simple. The only thing you need is a couple of floating tanks on a barge, built into those contraptions. Let's go back a little bit. Exactly. You put LNG tanks in there, standardized tanks, and then you push the whole thing down to satellite locations where you provide the fuel. Then you can start building up a network. And you don't start by trucking, because trucking is a much more complex beast to contain. You start by Danube River shipping, heavy rail applications, heavy horsepower engines, fleet vehicles such as bus fleets. Very simply because many of the problems that you're facing with trucking today, you don't face with those fleets, because either the engines are bigger or because the mode of operation is much more regular. And then, when you have a certain piece of infrastructure in place, you start meshing out in the region, start touching other businesses, distribution chains and everything. So you start a step-by-step approach to get people slowly used to it. What Gate needs to, in order to get that far, is change. And that won't be easy, because I know from my own experience, because there's nothing more reticent than a regasification terminal or customer to change. Both of them don't want to change things. Why? Because they have been experiencing, especially customers, have been experiencing a lot of pain in the past, and they know exactly whatever they are touching is going to produce more pain, and they don't want that. But nevertheless, they will have to do this, because currently they're this. A heavy, colossal, absolutely inflexible beast. And they have to become something like this. Something that's a bit more nimble. And that can be done. That's the surprising thing, because there's mechanisms in there, and I will just touch one of them. The umbrella principle, which we had put into the contract in 2007. In 2007, we had a lot of astonished faces looking, what the hell is this principle good for? Now, our management actually signed off on it very simply because they didn't understand what the value of this whole thing was, but they thought, hey, it doesn't look so bad, and actually it didn't really raise a lot of hackers. All those things actually went through pretty smoothly. We were fighting over other points. But the umbrella principle itself is something that was more or less unseen in the LNG world. Like a capacity taker, core capacity taker, created by himself an umbrella under which he could create capacity pretty much whatever he wanted, as long as he respected a certain number of capacities. That means he could sublease, he could, for example, sell, subsell pieces of it, spot, whatever he wanted. Of course, those are guidelines. It's not fleshed out in detail. And that's what it needs to. So there will be a lot of fighting and bickering, but the opening is in there. The possibility is in there. You can do it. It just needs translation by somebody who knows what he's doing. That means learning a shitload of new things. And I would encourage all those who are not coming from the natural gas world, all those who have a fresh mind on it and try to apply themselves to it, just join the show, very simply, because it's not how much you have done over the last 30 years in natural gas. Your past experience is not going to help you. I would even argue that your past experience is going to be a colossal burden, because it's very, very difficult to unhook yourself from the old gas and LNG world and apply some fresh thinking. First, there's one big principle in old-style LNG which seems to have been forgotten. And this is one of the things that I like most about it. The principle of cooperation, which is really important. If you're doing a project that has to produce stable returns over 20 years, you've got to cooperate. That principle has suffered enormously. enormously in the last 10 years. Very simply because depending on how the market was, one or the other party tried to take advantage of a certain situation. This is a shame. Because when you are going into a 20-year relationship on a contract, you will have plenty of opportunity to pay your partner back if he plays badly with you. Thank you.